like us to begin with a short exercise. So can everybody place their hands like this? Reach out your hands. Thank you. And I will count to 3. And when I say 3, I want you to clap your hands, okay? 1, 2, 3. So I did this to show you that we don't always do as other people tell us to do. We'd rather do as other people do. And this is important when it comes to creating well-being in ourselves and in others. I'm a psychologist and I train organizations, teams and individuals in creating happiness and well-being. And a couple of years back, I co-authored a book on the science of happiness. But when the book was published, I was actually in the middle of a life crisis. I'd just broken up with the person who I thought I'd spend my life with. I had no place to live and no job. And I think this is a very common human experience. We all face problems. We end up in crisis sometimes, and we struggle. But at the same time, I think most of us, we long for that other kind of life that entails meaning and connection and happiness. But it's kind of difficult to live this life, to always be there in this happy place. And today, I want to show you why your brain is not always on your side when it comes to creating happiness, but also what we can do to counter this. And it's not going to be by just positive thinking. This takes positive action, because happiness is a skill we all can train and work on. I want us to start here. How it's not just about positive thinking, something. And you kept worrying, even though you knew that worrying won't change the situation or help the situation in any way. And nevertheless, you just kept on worrying, hands up. Right? We're all doing this. And if we could have total mind power and just switched over toward these happy thoughts, we just have done that and get on with our lives. But that doesn't really happen, does it? And did you know that about half of the time that you've been listening to this speech, your mind has probably been wandering off, thinking about other things? According to a study by Daniel Gilbert and Matthew Killingsworth, our minds wander 46.9% of the time we spend awake. So our thoughts are automatic. They have a life of their own. And to create happiness by just controlled positive thinking, I think it's hard, if not even impossible. And I think it's time that we start talking more about this. How can we take positive action, actually making the change? Because if I would ask you to keep your focus on your breath, don't think about anything else for 5 minutes, I doubt that anyone, I think we all would be better able to achieve this. So it's really difficult to control our thoughts, and we have a better chance at controlling our actions, our behavior. Therefore, well-being is better built by positive action and not positive thinking. Also, we tend to look at ourselves as if we're these objective, rational beings that perceive situations in this objective manner, and we process information almost like a computer. I just take information in. But in reality, we're far from objective. And that's actually a good thing. Because if we would truly be able to process and perceive reality in all its nuanced complexity, we would be rather lost. It would be an overwhelming experience. So therefore, our brain have evolved several cognitive biases that helps us categorize and prioritize and sort information, making it more easy for us to navigate. But these cognitive biases, this sorting and prioritizing, is really affecting how we perceive life, how we perceive different situations. And I'd like us to explore this further in a little thought experiment. So I invite you all to think back at the last time that you had an evaluative conversation with your boss or manager. And I'm quite sure that you got to hear a lot of good things. Things like how you contribute to the workplace. But I'm also quite sure that you got to hear something that you can improve with yourself, with your performance. And once you leave this conversation, what do you think that your brain thinks is the most prioritized information? All the things that you do really good, or the one thing that you should be improving? Well, if you're somewhat like me, it would definitely be the latter. And this doesn't really have anything to do with how my brain works. This is actually a pattern that's been shown among people. For example, Teresa Amabile is a professor who explores how they experience everyday life. And she saw a pattern that the negative effect of a setback was more than twice as strong as the positive effect of a success.
俾你睇到佢無限嘅活力，嚟自於佢最期待嘅美味時刻，俾最愛嘅寶貝最好嘅營養、最好嘅保護，以科學帶嚟改變。
就算有危疾，我哋都可以 keep rolling。OK， 我繼續試試。
要繼續 keep 住靚㗎嘛。
繼續 keep 住 keep 住。繼續 jam 繼續 jam。
And the same thing goes with money. That we feel way worse about losing an amount of money than we feel happy about gaining the same amount. And if you would receive a compliment from a coworker and then a complaint from another coworker, these two comments don't neutralize each other. The complaint would definitely leave a stronger emotional mark. So now we need to ask ourselves, why? Why do we carry this emotional asymmetry? Why do we have this preparedness to experience unpleasant and negative emotions? And to understand that, we need to understand the context, the environment where our brain has been evolving for so many years. Today, several studies say that we have evolved a negativity bias, which helps our attention to be drawn to unpleasant or possibly threatening information. And this was really good back then and there when we were at the savannah fighting for survival every day. But today, here and now, this definitely affects how we perceive our life, how we perceive our relations, our workplace, our own performance, and ourselves. So to simplify this a bit, one could almost say that your brain is concerned that you survive throughout this day. It's anxious or tense or we worry. In one sense, we were built for this. But most of us, we long for this other kind of life with the meaning and the connection and the happiness. And I'm not sure that we can have one thing without the other, but there are definitely things and ways how we can cultivate happiness and build well-being. But this comes with good news and bad. The good news is that happiness is not something you find outside of yourself, and it's not something you have or don't have. It's a skill that we all can work on. But the problem is that we just don't do it. And this definitely applies for myself. This is the worst part of having written a book on happiness, because whenever I'm having a bad day, there's always someone who can do like, oh, haven't you read your own book, Katarina? You should know better. So I've learned that not even experts on happiness knows how to turn knowledge into action. And this is one of the reasons why me and a friend, we started a psychological gym where organizations and the teams and individuals could come and train these skills in order to create more happiness and well-being. Because we want to make psychological training as common as physical training. Because today we know so many things about how to eat properly and how to exercise to sustain physical health. But what would be the psychological version of a green smoothie or of doing 50 sit-ups? Is there really such a thing? And I would say yes, definitely. There's a lot of different exercises and things we can do, building healthy habits for ourselves. And I would like to present an example of this. So once you've finished listening to this speech, when you're leaving this room later tonight, I'd like you to bring out your smartphone and text a kind, appreciative gratitude text to someone that you care for. And maybe you can just notice how that feels. And this is a good example of an exercise that I often do with leaders and teams. And just a couple of weeks back, I did this at a 2-day leadership conference. And later, I found out that one of the participants, friends, and it just texting one person at one time, it won't change the world in any way. But turning this into a healthy habit over time can have a large impact. And to dedicate this habit to caring for your relationships might be one of the most powerful actions that you can take when it comes to happiness. So this might be the green smoothie that you've all been waiting for. According to several studies, having functioning relationships is as important, if not even more important, as exercising well and having a good diet. And this can even help us live longer. In a study from Harvard University, which began already back in 1938, researchers followed over 700 people to understand what it is that makes us flourish as people. So they followed these participants for decades, and in 2012, the results came. The researchers found that happiness doesn't come from wealth, doesn't come from fame or working hard. It comes from relationships. And it's not about the number of friends that you have or whether or not you're in a committed relationship with a partner. They found that it's the quality of the relationship that counts. Being able to be vulnerable, listening, and sharing what's close to your heart. That's what matters. And by now, we know that forming good, healthy habits when it comes to physical training or having a good diet, it takes dedication, it takes commitment. And I think we should approach psychological habits in the same way, and especially when it comes to relationships. So by now, we know that the brain has this tendency to highlight the negative, and that this is really tricky to revoke just by positive thinking. It takes positive action. But some actions are more powerful than others when it comes to happiness. Neighbors or with family or friends, this might be one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself. And I'd like us to do this one more time. So can everyone reach out their hands? And I'm going to count to 3. And when I say 3, I want you to clap your hands. Okay? 1, 2, 3. Yay! Great. So we learn by watching others' behavior. You've seen me do this 2 times, and already so many people changed their behavior. The more you can turn this talk into action by being more understanding and caring, not just towards others, but also towards yourself, I think that others will follow your example and do as you do. And the people outside of this building, they won't know what just happened. They won't know what changed. But we know that it was here, in this talk, that everything started. Thank you.
So I have what some consider to be one of the toughest jobs on the planet. I am a mom. Yes. I am a parent to 3 very busy little boys who magically think I'm a doctor, a baker, a coach, a chef, a therapist, and have the patience of a saint 24/7. I truly do my best, and some days are definitely better than others, especially that part about having the patience of a saint. I want what most parents want for my kids. I want them to have a happy childhood. I want them to be free to play, build friendships, grow to be kind, compassionate, happy adults. But there seems to be one small challenge. 220 million children and 1 billion adults suffer from anxiety, depression, and conduct disorders. Not exactly a pretty picture of happy people on a happy planet, now is it? Unfortunately, as adults, whether you're a parent or not, this is what our children are learning from us. They see how busy we are every day. They feel our stress, and they watch us struggle to find our own happiness. So how do we go from anxiety and depression to happy? Some good news. The World Health Report also states the best predictor of whether a child becomes a satisfied adult is through their emotional health in childhood. So if I have this right, it should be easy. Happy children, happy adults, happy planet, yes? Well, this is the exact lesson I learned from my dad. When I was a little girl growing up in the big city of London, Ontario, every Christmas morning, my dad would take my 3 sisters and I to his office. You see, my dad was a doctor and his office, a hospital. It was our job to stand around the beds of his patients and sing Christmas carols. We started with the same song every time, and my dad, he'd lead the singing. Now this is probably a TEDx first, so join me if you know it. We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Woo! You guys are amazing. I am signing you all up for this year. And look at your smiles. We did this every Christmas morning for years. Those patients, they sing along with us, just like you did. And their smiles would light up their hospital rooms. this is what I learned from our singing. Giving back to those patients, it made them happy. And it made me happy. And we've all heard that giving. Well, researchers from all over the world have been studying the science and psychology of giving. They've discovered that our brains and our bodies are actually hardwired for giving. When we give, our endorphins kick in, giving us this natural high feeling. They've actually called it the helper's high. Our oxytocin levels rise. This would be our love hormone. And for those of you that have been looking for the fountain of youth, it's our body's natural anti-aging remedy. And that feeling I got when I volunteered with my dad, that's serotonin, our body's happy trailer. But here's the icing on the cake. Our cortisol levels drop. This is our stress hormone. Giving reduces anxiety and stress, and it makes us happy. Now, what if I told you you could be happy every day? And it's simple. In fact, it's so simple, a 3-year-old can do it. Well, on my first son, Nick's 3rd birthday, I decided I was going to teach him how he could be happy every day. I was going to teach Nick to give. I introduced the idea over birthday cake and ice cream. Nick, we are going to start this super fun family project together. We are going to give back to the world every day for 1 year. Now I waited to see the excitement on his face, that excitement that I was feeling, and instead, he says, "Mommy, how many days are in here?" Oh yeah, not exactly the response I was looking for, but Nick was just 3. I had to approach this daily giving idea a little differently. This time I got out some craft paper and a big box of kind, helpful giving to a person, an animal, or the planet every day for 365 days. Now, when I shared this idea with friends and family, they thought I was being, shall we say, a little ambitious. I was going to give back to the world every day for 365 days with a 3-year-old. I agreed. Seemed like a lot. But not when you start small. Just one give, one day at a time. Nick and I started a list just to get us going. It had to be easy and close to home. Donate towels and blankets to our local animal shelter. Caught on, and now he was excited. He was actually so excited he wanted to start that day on his birthday. So, first stop down to the local animal shelter to donate towels and blankets. Well, when we walked into that shelter, you instantly got hit by this smell of somewhere between wet dog and disinfectant. We could hear dogs barking. I knew they were locked in cages. They were behind a closed door. Nick handed our towels and blankets over to the nice lady behind the desk. She gave us a big smile and she thanked us for our donation. Well, as we turned to leave, Nick noticed 2 big glass doors that led into a room filled with cats. He went up to that glass and he peered in, and then he turned to me and he said, "Mommy, can you see those cats sleeping on that red blanket back there? Will our blankets be for those cats?" He turned to the nice lady behind the desk and she said, "You bet." You could just see Nick's little brain going. He was making the connection that his daily give was going to help those cats. Nick learned that very first day, as he turned to me and he smiled and he said, "Awesome, Mom," that giving made him happy. Day 2, down at the beach for a little fun in the sun and a game. How much garbage could we pick up in 3 minutes or less? Day 3, we took that garbage and we sorted it. At the ripe old age of 3, Nick learned to recycle. Well, daily giving quickly became a routine for Nick. Just like kind of brushing his teeth. Well, actually, come to think of it, it would be easier to teach a 3-year-old to give every day than it is to brush their teeth every day. Yeah, for sure. Nick asked if we could share our daily giving adventures with our friends and family so they could follow along. So that very first day, I started a blog, and I called it 365 give. Now, just so you know, I am not a writer or some social media guru. So you can imagine how surprised I was when people started reading the blog, other than my friends and family. They started reading and engaging from all over the world. They send me emails and leave comments with their daily giving stories because they were inspired by Nick. Actually, I was so excited, I'm going to share just a few with you today. So Henry from London, England wrote, I walk past the same homeless man every day on my way to work. Today, I brought him breakfast. He was so grateful I stopped. It's going to be my daily give every that live on a street near my home to lunch today. The children were so happy to have a meal. And for the first time in a long time, they felt like somebody cared. And Amy from Australia. I'm a grade 4 teacher, and I've started 365 Give, a daily giving practice, in my classroom. Well, this one took me by surprise. Could you really teach 365 Give in the classroom? I didn't know. I was just a mom. But as fate has it, I get a call from a good friend, Sarah. She's a local elementary school teacher, and she says, Jacqueline, I take the 365 Give concept into my classroom. Actually, my entire school. Well, we were both so excited, we went to work. We created an educational program, a tool for teachers that integrates a simple daily giving practice with their curriculum. We called it the 365 Give Challenge. It's unique because it's powered by the kids. They choose how they're going to give, support causes, and impact the world in ways that they choose. We started in Sarah's school, and I actually couldn't wait to hear how the kids were going to give. A few weeks into the challenge, I went down and I met with a grade 2 class, 7-year-old kids. When I walked into that classroom, I'm not sure who was more excited, me or the kids. First up was Armand. He waved his hand frantically. He just couldn't wait to tell me all about the fresh baked cookies they had made and delivered to their local firehouse. They want to thank the firefighters for all they did in their community. Armand was just beaming with pride. Next up was Mia. Well, Mia's little cousin had suffered from cancer that year. And the kids, the entire class, they decided they were going to do a popcorn sale right at school. They raised $252 over recess. And they donated it to a charity that supports kids with cancer. But this is the part that just about had me to tears. Because I could have never have dreamed that my super fun family project with my son could cause a ripple to so many. And it's what their teacher, Mrs. Story, said to me. Jacqueline, my kids are understanding how their actions can make a better world. It's making my classroom happy. The 365 Give Challenge has now touched over 5,000 children in 25 schools, and we have only just begun. Thank you. The kids are sharing their daily giving stories with other kids, and it's creating a ripple into their families, their communities, and around the world. The challenge was created for kids, but it's actually for all of us. It doesn't matter where you live, what you do, or how old you are. Just imagine if we all did it. It started with just one child giving every day. That's 365 daily gives. We shared, and it's rippled to right here with all of you. Now let's take everybody in this room. Over 2,000 people times 365 daily gives. That is over 700,000 daily gives. It's no longer just one child giving every day. Creating a better world, a happier world. And it's so simple, a 3-year-old can do it. It's a daily habit, just like brushing your teeth. Start your list today. Take
作為一個專業投資者咧，我經常會用一啲叫 day trade 嘅交易策略嘅，即日。
Namaste. Let me share a fable with you. For stories are ways of immortalizing messages. 2 monks, Yesmi and Nomi, are returning back to the monastery after a day of teaching in the nearby village. They were just about to cross the river when they hear a woman crying. Yesmi walks up to her in the village across the river. Since the river had risen that day, she was feeling miserable that she will not be able to go back to her toddler, and her child would cry for her all night. On hearing her, Yesmi volunteers to help her. He carries her across the river and drops her on the other side. And they continue with their walk. About half an hour into the walk, Nomi, in a very agitated tone, speaks up. He says, Yesmi, do you know what you've done? Yesmi calmly looks at him. Our master said, never look at a woman. You spoke to her. Our master said, never speak to a woman. You touched her. Our master said, never touch a woman. You carried her. Yesmi calmly looks at Nomi and says, yes, that is true, but I have dropped her half an hour ago. It is you who's still carrying her. Let me take you away from this story for a bit, for a tiny experience of meditation. Please close your eyes. I still see a few sneaking a peek. It is safe to close your eyes. Inhale and exhale deep and slow. With every exhale, raise the edges of your lips into a gentle smile. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Broaden your smile. Open your eyes. Do you recognize that with a little attention to your breath and a smile to your face, you're more calm and more present? The power to peace is all. Yesmi and Nomi represent 2 states of being. Fundamentally, every one of us live only in 2 states. One is a stressful state. The other is a no-stress state. We call this no-stress state a beautiful state, for that is how life feels when you live free of stress. Generally, stress refers to tension, but anger, fear, hurt, loneliness, frustration are all stressful states, aren't they? Beautiful state is a state of connection, joy, love, compassion, vitality, and passion. If you're not in a beautiful state, your default state is stress. If you look at the entirety of human life, behind war or peace, cooperation or corrosive politics, love or separation, persistence or failure, finally, happy children or a generation that is troubled. Behind all this is the driving force of these two states. Behind every choice and every action is the driving force of only one of these two states. So the most important choice is from which state do we want to live our life? From which state do we want to relate to the people in our life? From which state do we want to achieve and fulfill every vision of our life? Sadly, our education, entire system of a society, our parents, our religion do not bring sufficient attention to our inner state. In fact, the very structure of education at schools makes us feel ashamed of being less. It is a total compromise on the essence of being human. Let us get back to our story again. Yes, me represents the beautiful state, and no me represents the stressful state. No me has created a problem in his mind and is paralyzed with it. Yes, me solves the problem of a fellow human being and continues with this peaceful walk. No me is agitated before the event, during the event, and after the event. And his thinking becomes incredibly stupid. And once the action is complete, his departure from the situation too is total. In a beautiful state, there is no compulsive rumination of the past or anxiety over the future. It is a state where you experience inner simplicity and the brilliance of an uncluttered mind. It is a state where you are connected to the present. No me is lost. In a stressful state, you are lost. You're disconnected from the others. You might be amidst people, but yet feel lonely. Yes, me is different. He's connected to the lady's plight. He helps her. He understands Nomi's distress and tries to help him out with a wise remark. In a beautiful state, you're powerful enough to help yourself and help others around you. You're outright intelligent, and your actions are decisive and powerful. Let us observe Nomi a little longer. Anger and confusion have mounted over his ideals of duty and virtue. In my observation, when a stressful state mounts over your ideals, unconditional love, duty, or honesty, we become insensitive and indifferent. We hurt the very cause we served, and we hurt the very people we love. Yes, me helped, not because he would be barred entry into heaven. Definitely not. Nor did he help, not because he would feel guilty if he hadn't helped. He helped because he was able to feel the lady's pain. He was able to feel her suffering. Actions in a beautiful state arise from a place of connection, not from ideal. There have been times when we have been yes me, there have been times when we have been no me. We have lived in stress and disconnection and caused greater confusion in our own lives and lives of people around us. We have lived in a beautiful state of connection and contributed to the well-being of ourselves and people around us. War, division, and conflict of every form can only end when more and more of us live in a beautiful state. So the big question is, how do we break free? How do we live life without being bogged down by stress? how do we address numerous challenges of our life living in a beautiful state? There are three well-trodden paths people usually take. One, we live in stressful states and plummet into hurting inner states. Two, we try to escape stress. We try to achieve a temporary dopamine high. However, when the dopamine plateaus, we are left feeling emotionally dry and empty. Three, we try replacing inconvenient beliefs, stories, and ideas into more convenient ones. The problem, however, is none of these three paths have the power to get you off the gravitational pull of suffering or long-term stress. And we succumb back into the vortex of habitual stressful emotions. We need a greater inner power to get us to a beautiful state. And that is the way of inner truth. About 8 years ago, we as a family met with an accident while at Big Bear Lake in California. We emerged safe from the accident. But while in the waters, Krishnaji, my husband, co-founder of One World Academy, realized the root cause of all human suffering. He saw what kept suffering alive for days, months, and years after a stressful event was over in anyone's life. Past and present circumstances, other people and their behavior can trigger stress in us, but they do not keep us chained in our unhappiness. While in the waters, he saw the true reason for humanity's suffering. Self-centric thinking. It is a total preoccupation with oneself. It is a total incessant preoccupation with oneself. And it is this preoccupation that separates you from the other. It is this preoccupation that is responsible for war, conflict, and division of every kind that we see in the world today. This truth can be inconvenient for us. But if we can observe our emotional suffering in the light of this insight, then this truth can liberate us. In unhappiness, in stressful states, you're preoccupied with yourself. We are preoccupied with injustice done to us. We are preoccupied with pleasure that was denied us. We are preoccupied with opportunities that did not come our way. We are preoccupied with love that was withheld from us. It is a total preoccupation with oneself. And in this state, we are not concerned with finding solutions to the problem at hand. For the entire thinking is only me, 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 and me. That is all we think in unhappiness. Let us observe Nomi in the light of this insight. Throughout the story, he's preoccupied. He's preoccupied with his rightness. He's preoccupied with his guilt at having allowed a wrong to happen. He's not concerned about the situation, nor is he concerned about the lady and her son, nor his friend. He's constantly justifying within himself that he was right in ignoring the suffering woman, and that he was great in following the rules. Suffering is a total preoccupation with oneself. It is an obsessive, self-centric thinking. Is the most powerful antidote for any form of suffering that could have gripped you. When you see it, not only you walk out of stressful states, but there is a great release of energy. And you awaken to a sense of power, connection, freedom, and purpose. We know the way. Let us do a small 3-question meditation. Please close your eyes. Please remember, meditation is not about a religion. It is about being human. It is about returning to a beautiful state. Bring attention to your breath. Inhale and exhale. Deep. Wish from the bottom of your heart that the other person lives in a beautiful state. And if you're comfortable, you may hug the other. Thank you so much. Namaste.
馬太得救啊！
你有咩問題啊？
你都見到啦，我呢個位置係手臂好粗啦，咁跟住有副乳啦，呢個位置，跟住見到肋骨呢度外翻咗嘅，跟住條腰係冇腰嘅，可以話係即係好直啦。咁另外就係大髀呢個位置一啲肉係捉住行落係好唔舒服嘅。
黐髀咯嚇。
係啦，另外就膊頭呢個位置成日都好似覺得好攰，縮咗一嚿咁樣咯。
都幾多問題喎。
係啊。
咁其實咧，你就係着錯胸圍咯。咁因為你着咗一個運動圍，咁而家時下好多女仔咧都貪舒服，着呢個運動。
Hi everyone. Gosh, I wish I could dance, but I can't and you really don't want me to. So instead, I thought I would talk a little today about how people think. I'm fascinated by this question. I'm a social psychologist, which basically means I'm a professional people watcher. So this is what I do. I try to figure out how humans think and how we might be able to think better. And here's something I noticed a few years ago about how I seem to think. Here's a typical week in my life, which usually seems to revolve entirely around publishing papers. So here I am in the maximum of my artistic abilities as a stick figure, going along at baseline, and a paper gets accepted. I get this rush, this blip of happiness, and then I'm back to baseline by about lunchtime. A few days later, a paper might get rejected, and that feels pretty awful. And I wait for that blip to end, but somehow I just can't stop thinking about it. And here's the craziest part. Even if another paper gets accepted the next day, well, that's nice, but somehow I can't get that pesky rejection out of my head. So what is going on here? Why does a failure seem to stick in our minds so much longer than a success? Well, together with my colleague Amber Boydston in the political science department, stuck in the negatives. We all know intuitively that there are different ways of thinking about things. The same glass, the saying goes, can be seen as half full or half empty. And there's a lot of research in the social sciences showing that depending on how you describe the glass to people, as half full or half empty, it changes how they feel about it. So if you describe the glass as half full, this is called a gain frame because you're focusing on what's gained, then people like it. But if you describe the same glass as half empty, a loss frame, then people don't like it. But we wondered, what happens when you try to switch from thinking about it one way to thinking about it another way? Can people shift back and forth, or do they get stuck in one way of thinking about it? Does one of these labels, in other words, tend to stick more in the mind? Well, to investigate this question, we conducted a simple experiment. We told participants in our experiment about a new surgical procedure, and we randomly assigned them to one of two conditions. For participants in the first condition, the first group, we described the surgical procedure in terms of gains. We said it had a 70% success rate. And for participants in the second group, we described the procedure in terms of losses. We said it had a 30% failure rate. So it's the exact same procedure. We're just focusing people's attention on the part of the glass that's full or the part of the glass that's empty. Perhaps unsurprisingly, people like the procedure when it's described as having a 70%. Participants in the first group, you could think of this as a 30% failure rate. And now they don't like it anymore. They've changed their minds. And we told participants in the second group, you could think of this as a 70% success rate, but unlike the first group, they stuck with their initial opinion. They seemed to be stuck in the initial loss frame that they saw at the beginning of the study. We conducted another experiment. This time we told participants about the current governor of an important state who is running for re-election against his opponent. We again had two groups of participants, and we described the current governor's track record to them in one of two ways. We said that when the current governor's office, statewide budget cuts were expected to affect about 10,000 jobs. And then half the participants read that under the current governor's leadership, 40% of these jobs had been saved. And they like the current governor. They think he's doing a great job. The rest of the participants read that under the current governor's leadership, 60% of these jobs had been lost. And they don't like the current governor. They think he's doing a terrible job. But then, once more, we added a twist. For participants in the first group, we reframed the information in terms of losses. And now they didn't like the current governor anymore. And for participants in the second group, we reframed the information in terms of gains. But just like in the first study, this didn't seem to matter. People in this group still didn't like the current governor. So notice what this means. Once the loss frame gets in there, it sticks. People can't go back to thinking about jobs saved once they've thought about jobs lost. So in both of these scenarios, actually, the current governor gets ousted in favor of his opponent. Well, at this point, we were getting curious. Why does this happen? Could it be that it's actually mentally harder for people to convert from losses to gains than it is for them to go from gains to losses? So we conducted a third study to test how easily people could convert from one frame to another. This time, we told participants, imagine there's been an outbreak of an unusual disease and 600 lives are at stake. And we asked participants in one group, if 100 lives are saved, how many will be lost? And we asked participants in the other group, if 100 lives are lost, how many will be saved? So everyone just has to calculate 600 minus 100 and come up with the answer of 500. But whereas people in one group have to convert from gains to losses in order to do that, people in the second group have to convert from losses to gains. We timed how long it took them to solve this simple math problem. And what we found was that when people had to convert from gains to losses, they could solve the problem quite quickly. It took them about 7 seconds on average. But when they had to convert from losses to gains, well, now it took them far longer, almost 11 in our heads, and to resist our attempts to change it. What I take away from this research and from related research is that our view of the world has a fundamental tendency to tilt toward the negative. It's pretty easy to go from good to bad, but far harder to shift from bad to good. We literally have to work harder to see the upside of things. And this matters. So think about the economy. Here's economic well-being from 2007 to 2010. And you can see it tanked, just like we all remember. And then by late 2010, it had recovered by most objective measures. But here's consumer confidence over the same time period. You can see it tanks right along with the economy, but then it seems to get stuck. Instead of rebounding with the economy itself, consumers seem to be psychologically stuck back there in the recession. So oddly then, it may take more effort to change our minds about how the economy is doing than to change the economy itself. On a more personal level, what this research means to me is that you have to work to see the upside. Literally, this takes work. This takes effort. And you can practice this. You can train your mind to do this better. There's research out of UC Davis showing that just writing for a few minutes each day about things that you're grateful for can dramatically boost your happiness and well-being and even your health. Also rehearse good news and share it with others. We tend to think, right, that misery loves company, that venting will help get rid of our negative emotions, that we'll feel better if we just talk about how terrible our day was. And so we talk, and we talk, and we talk about the boss who's driving us crazy, and the friend who never called us back, and the meeting at work where every little thing that could go wrong did. But we forget to talk about the good stuff. And yet that's exactly where our minds need the most practice. So my husband, who has this disconcerting habit of listening to what I say other people should do and then pointing out that technically has taken to listening to me for about 2 minutes on days when I come home all grumpy and complaining about everything. And he listens and he says, okay, but what happened today that was good? And so I tell him about the student who came up to me after class with this really interesting, insightful question. And I tell him about the friend who emailed me out of the blue this morning just to say hello. And somewhere in the telling, I start to smile. And I start to think that the upside. We can be more aware that bad tends to stick. One mean comment can stick with somebody all day, all week even. And bad tends to propagate itself, right? Somebody snaps at you and you snap back, and you snap at the next guy too. But what if the next time somebody snapped at you, you forgave them? What if the next time you had a really grumpy waitress, you left her an extra large tip? Our minds may be built to look for negative information and to hold on to it. But we can also retrain our minds if we put some effort into it and start to see that the glass may be a little more full than we initially thought. Thank you.
Dare to be true, dare to be true, and dare to be true. What do you mean, Elizabeth? Dare to be true? Are you suggesting we're not true? Not honest? What? Yes, Mashpee, I am suggesting that you're in denial. You are. Well, maybe not you personally, not individually, but collectively. I'm here to remind you that denial is not only an individual phenomenon, it's also, and far more forcefully, a collective one, a socially organized state of mind and being that depends on our ability to hold two truths or more as if they were one, and to erase the ones we don't want to see. To block things that challenge our sense of security and our certainty about how the world just is, and how we fatally interpret to mean how the world always has been and always will be. How do we incorporate those frightening ideas and problems? Impending climate disaster, racist harm. Well, we usually ignore our good common sense and our very own senses and push away those ideas that don't fit into our dominant national narrative. And we return quickly to that pillow, that soft comfort of our status quo, just the way things are. And this explains how even the best of us can fail to acknowledge hard truths, even though we may be well-informed, even though we may see with our very own eyes. We can call this state being of one clear mind. It's a comfortable place to be. I am always of two or more minds, and sometimes I feel it will be the death of me, the strain of holding this paradox. I think I'll feel this way until more of us are of two or more minds. Let me explain. That's me on South Cape Beach, just up the road, with puppies. And we can witness my two-mind state right here in this sweet summer photo, even with the puppies. I am a woman of Italian and Swedish descent. My family came here in the early 1900s. I am what we call white. How did I come to be on this land? Whose stories, whose lives were silenced, erased for my image to be made in this place? I come to you this evening to talk about the gap between our country's stated ideals, equality, opportunity, justice, and the lived experience of those who were never meant to claim them. It's the very definition of preposterous, as are the stories that we tell and make up to cover. I come to you thinking about first what it means to stand on this ground, Mashpee, hallowed ground made sacred by the atrocities that happened here, that are rarely mentioned here, though their impacts are everywhere. Men, we're brave enough to see it. I honor our First Nation, Wampanoag, Wampanoag, people of the First Light, presencing here, grounding here, to feel the charge of the earth and all its energies, to feel all who have walked here. I feel the call to truth from erasure and harm. Will you come with me here, now, tonight? Let's go together in the eye of our imagination to Coles Hill, Plymouth. Let's see the sea of Wampanoag people gather to mark a national day of mourning, also known as Thanksgiving. Here's what Wampanoag people say about this holiday. Thanksgiving Day is a reminder of the genocide of millions of Native people, the theft of Native lands, and the erasure of Native cultures. I'm of two minds, Mashpee. I am of two minds, and the space between is toxic. On the one hand, a laundry list of human rights violations that the world has collectively called the very worst: genocide, rape, forced displacement, enslavement, cultural annihilation, and more. On the other, turkey and pie, football and long naps, and ironically, the kind of kitchen conversations that can crack a family in two when they find that they're not of one mind. By the consumption that's defiled Indigenous land and life to the point where the Great Turtle Island, the earth itself, is in extreme peril. Harm. What has always lived between these two American stories is all the unspeakable harm we now document with data that exposes gaps in the very stuff of life itself: health, mortality, wealth, education, residence, mobility, opportunity, well-being, prosperity. Harm directly descended from the power dynamics initiated on what we still call First Encounter Beach. Hard enough for many among us even to acknowledge that there's such a gap. But more than the gap itself, I'm asking you to think tonight about how our single-minded national determination to be of one clear mind, unencumbered by the painful complexities of our own history, has allowed us to all live with a gap that is utterly intolerable according to our own stated values and convictions. It's how even the most aware among us have swallowed a status quo built on repression and denial and injustice. If you're not of two minds, Mashpee, then you must be repressing something, pushing something away, denying you, accusing us. Again, it's not just you I accuse, Mashpee. It's me too. It's all of us, because we all breathe the air of our dominant culture, and we all internalize the toxic right along with the good.